think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up. But you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself and reservation. I'm gonna start my own nation with myself and reservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And welcome everybody to Political Unmuted. As you see, I've been banished to the back bedroom with the bunk beds and with the blue decor, the Tory blue sheets on the bunk beds and the blue-grey walls. But please do not in fury turn off because you think we've gone Tory. Remember, if seeing blue makes you see red, that's exactly what we want to happen. So welcome to our listeners and welcome to the team. And we've got the full team today here for you. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Hello, Stuart.
Hello.
Hello, Laura. Silent Laura. And hello, Sam.
Hello.
Hello, Sam. I'm just going to have a very short word with Sam. How's it going up at County Hall? Are you settling in nicely?
I'm having a great time. I keep being interrupted by the council who want to fill me full of training, and I just want to be out there, you know, filling up potholes and reporting fly tipping and attending parish council meetings. So I've had loads of training on stuff that I probably won't ever use. I know a lot more about taxis now than I ever really wanted to know. But hopefully we'll get past this chunk and I'll be able to really do more sort of caseworky stuff. I've had some lovely meetings with the football club, lovely meetings with the food bank, lovely meetings with general members of the public, which I have enjoyed very much.
Thank you. You know what I think about this is that many people go up to County Hall, very committed community workers, and when they get there, they find that you're not at County Hall to be an enhanced community worker. You are there to be a county councillor, and your responsibility now is County Durham, and that's what they're giving you all the training for. You're all very welcome. So let's move to the show. Paul.
I suppose it's got to be the call for the TUC for more help, given that businesses are going to be suffering and workers will be suffering, and we're seeing John Trickett called for a wealth tax, didn't he, because of all of the transfer of wealth from poor people. So I think poor people have lost something like 700 million, or it might be even more than that, and the richest people have gained 700 and odd million. It's been a direct transfer of wealth from the poorest to the richest during COVID. So my moment of the week is we're in lockdown again, and I wonder who it's going to benefit. Well, we're not in lockdown again, are we? But they're not releasing us from our shackles of being, I don't know. I don't even know what the restrictions are anymore, to be honest. I don't even know what they are. So that's my moment of the week. I hope that was done in a suitably confusing way, because I'm totally baffled by what's going on, and I'm sure everyone else is.
Do you think that Boris made? Do you think the Tories made a big? So I was listening on the politics show this lunchtime to a woman from New York, and she was saying that they've done it completely different to the British government in New York. They've under promised and over provided. And in Britain, what we've continually done is overpromise and underprovide. And this is a typical example. I think everybody was expecting the 21st of June to be Freedom Day, and then suddenly says, "Oh God, it can't be Freedom Day."
Depends what your goal is, really, doesn't it? It really, if your goal is to help the country, if your goal is to help people in general, then they have spectacularly failed. If your goal is to improve your popularity in the opinion polls, they have spectacularly succeeded. So they are playing politics on a grand scale. People are suffering, and they are cementing their legacy. They're cementing their power. So that's the worry for me. I think they've probably played it well politically, because they've managed to get themselves into a situation where they think absolutely everyone is acting in bad faith. Government, opposition, everyone, because the opposition have really messed up as well. But if you're talking about doing a good job for the people of the country, they've done an appalling job.
Thank you. Laura, moment of your week.
I think I had a few this week, but I'm going to go with, because last week it was particularly depressing, my moment of the week. So I'll go with a happy one this week. And that is we finalised the details of the Women's Banner Group's gala event in lieu of the Durham Miners Gala. It's going to be on the 21st of August up at Red Hills, and it's going to be all about education, and it's a family day. We've got awesome speakers. We've got Joe Stolo's coming to play for us. We've got Kate Fox, the comedian, who's going to come and do a stint for us. We've got Adams Education, who is going to put on some activities for kids, as well as our very own Fleur Griffiths, who's going to put on some activities for kids. We've got agreement from some awesome food vans and alcohol vendors who are going to come park up, so there's something there for people to eat and drink. I just need the sun to come out and we'll be fine.
So what you're doing there is absolutely spectacular, and I've been to one of these gala days that you've laid on. They are wonderful. So what's the date again, Laura?
It's the Saturday the 21st of August, exactly a week after the Easington Miners picnic happens.
Right, put it in your diaries, everybody. It'll be a weekend to enjoy.
Tim's asked a question there as well.
Hey?
Tim's asked whether middle-aged lads are allowed.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes,
encouraged.
Tim, middle-aged lads like you and me, we provide the money. That's what we're there to do, to shell out while all these young people all sort of enjoy themselves. I am not in the doghouse, and I'm just in the little back bedroom. Leanne Powell, we need to talk about why it isn't Freedom Day. This is just such a thing. I'm sorry to break into our moment of the week to read this, but forget the Tory spin to allow time for more vaccines. It's because of their incompetence over borders. And to be fair to the Labour Party, they've been saying this over and over all day, that if he'd closed the borders, we wouldn't be in this situation now. And absolutely. I'm in trouble with Bonnie. Sam, your moment of the week.
My moment of the week is the good news that the Home Office have decided not to deport Ossian Brown. Ossian Brown is a young man who is 22 years old. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison over a law that isn't a law anymore, joint enterprise. And basically he's autistic. Is severely delayed, and he's sort of understanding of what's going on around him in the world. But because he had this conviction, basically the law allows the Home Office to deport people if they've committed a crime and had a prison sentence of over 1 year. The issue is, of course, this lad. He'd never been to Jamaica. He came to this country, I think, when he was about 5 years old. And being that he's autistic, it would be really cruel, especially cruel, to deport him to Jamaica and expect him to fend for himself. He probably wouldn't survive, to be honest. That's the situation. So it is really positive that the Home Office have turned around on this, but just again, so much stress and upset and worry over, maybe we should look at whether these laws are the type of laws that are appropriate for a civilized society. The idea of they broke the law, so let's get rid of them, is just a very harsh and these things that hit the headlines show you where it doesn't work, but there's loads of other people who will be sent away where they've just not managed to get the headlines, and those are the people that I'm also worried about.
Brilliant, thank you, and a lot of agreement on the chat stream. Thank you very much, everybody. And who does that leave? Stuart, moment of the week.
Mine's a very simple one. It's basically little more than a figure, and that is in the first 3 months of this year, super yacht sales went up 46% in 3 months. And we're not just talking little round the doors boats, we're talking things that helicopters can land on. Proper super wealth stuff. And it's just, if nurses can't get a 1% pay rise, but we're selling super yachts at, by the barrel load, apparently, I was taken back by it.
Here's an idea, Stuart. I mean, when I talk about this kind of thing, I always say that you mustn't worry about the rich spending their wealth, because that then goes back into the economy to create jobs and sort of, I don't believe in trickle down, but nevertheless, it provides incomes for ordinary people who are working on those boats. Now, Stuart, do you think that sort of what I'm worried about is where they just hide it away in offshore banks and things like that? Is it it's a terrible example of the inequality of wealth, but do you not agree that it's better that they're spending it than they're just salting it away?
Honestly, I'd rather they spent it on cleaning up the environment, or, this is, almost an excess of living life, isn't it? When you've got a boat that's essentially a floating hotel as a personal, item. I think that's a bit much.
Thank you. I mean, I've only got a couple myself, so I don't feel too bad. Paul.
I'm just, they've done a lot of studies, and actually the wealth of the very wealthiest circulates with the wealthy, even when it's, when they buy high-end things, that goes to someone else who makes a profit from high-end things, and it creates a super community. So there are a lot of people who think that actually the only way to redistribute this wealth properly, trickle down, doesn't exist. There's no such thing. Even when they're spending on things, even when they spend their money, it's retained in the wealthiest circles, and that's a proven fact. So yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for your moments of the week. Aren't these moments of the week really illuminating? And we find these little nuggets. But nevertheless, we're going to move on to our main big story.
Now it's time for the big story.
Big story this week is the G7 summit. Paul, was there any point in it whatsoever? Was there anything that you thought, well, that was worth that?
I'll go through the things that, like, so in the build up to it, there was quite a lot of excitement. Like David Attenborough was talking and saying maybe we can do something really big on climate. And, there was a lot of talk about like doing something really special on vaccines. And, because we all know that this global pandemic is a global pandemic. And without vaccinating the entire world, then we'll just create variants and so on. And so there was some real excitement around it. And funnily enough, I just don't think there was very much news on what was going on, which suggests to me that there wasn't that much going on. Like there was the big sausage debacle of when Boris Johnson got in an argument with Macron over sausages and Brexit and things, and then there was a bit on the Northern Ireland Protocol as well. But I'm just going to split it up into things. So like one big takeaway. And this is from Politico, actually. The first one is they thought they might be pushing for no coal, or a transition away from coal, but there's really been nothing firm put on those, which means that if the G7 can't do it, then why in the world should other poorer countries who are financially less sound? Why should they be doing this? And again, this comes down to corporations, and the big petrochemical companies and what have you, the big energy providers. They don't want that resource to be decreased, diminished in any way whatsoever. So even if we can move away from these things to protect the climate, that isn't in the interests of the people who support the politicians and who fund the politicians. And a lot of it, who was it who said that they should wear little sponsorship things like a NASCAR driver? Was it Robin Williams? He said politicians should wear badges on a NASCAR driver. But anyway, so there's been very little on that. Then let's talk about China. They had a real pop at China, and this included NATO having a pop at China as well. So obviously, China have got some human rights issues going on. It is a little bit hypocritical to say they only have that, to say we're holier than thou and we're doing better than you. I don't really think you're going to change China's behaviour much by telling them they're wrong. I don't really believe telling people they're wrong in general changes their behaviour particularly much anyway. But that was a big talking point. So there's a big problem brewing there. Also, I'll get on to vaccines next, I think, because China have actually pledged nearly as many vaccines as one country to the rest of the world as the G7 have pledged, which is quite interesting. So the vaccine pledge, we don't know whether they've pledged 1 billion or 800 million. It could be either of the two because different figures have been floated about and so on. But we need 11 billion. That's what the WHO have recommended, 11 billion vaccination doses. Britain got a little bit of a hammering on this one because they haven't pledged any of their excess as well, which is a pretty standard thing as well. Oh no, we'll just stick to our own, even if they've got excess. And again, that kind of closed view of the world. It's a little bit strange that Boris Johnson chaired that summit and then sort of didn't get involved with anything on it. Brexit was a bit of a problem. They had a bit of an argument over that, over the Northern Ireland Protocol, because Boris Johnson obviously is saying that wasn't even going to happen, and yet everyone else is saying, well, you're going to make this big problem, and Canada got involved and so on, and there was all sorts of problems. But Boris Johnson once again is pretending that there is no problem when there is clearly a problem. And tax and trade was a huge thing as well. So they thought they were going to try and close down those tax loopholes that allow people to hold wealth offshore, tax the multinational companies, because really it's all a legal issue. Without tackling the laws around tax evasion, you aren't going to get anywhere by just saying, oh, we'll just tax Google this and we'll tax and so on. But then Britain came to the rescue for the billionaires and said, can we please water these down? And they ended up getting some sort of agreement on watering them down. They also wanted to protect trade in the city of London. And Rishi Sunak, I think, was quoted as saying, the banks have done enough. So, the 2008 crisis that he personally helped to create, haven't they suffered enough? Haven't these bankers suffered enough? They had to take that humiliating bailout from the public, and the public suffered for that, and they felt just awful on their yachts. So, you know, that's about as well as I can sum it up.
Big yachts.
Yeah, they're big yachts. So that's about it, really. Like, there wasn't any huge decisions where they actually said they were going to do anything. It was just a bit blustery and like, hey, look at us, aren't we great? We're the G7. We're really rich. We can do whatever we want, and we will choose to do what we want, which is very little.
I mean, sort of, Alan Willis sums up what you've said. It's all lip service, which I think is a fair summing up of what you said. And Ruth Davison, that all she can imagine, all she can remember is stood on the beach watching the red arrows. It seemed, didn't it, very much a non-event. Sam, I mean, let's begin to try and get down to some of these things. It wasn't all failure and it wasn't all success by any means. Can you identify what you took away as being the greatest achievement of the week and the greatest failure of the week? Can you just sort of zero, what would be your choices for those two things?
Well, not really an achievement for our government, but an achievement in terms of like what is right and good in the world is that Joe Biden managed to explicitly say that we won't get a trade deal without treating Ireland fairly, didn't he? He said, you know, you've really got to iron this out. And it's one of the, unfortunately, it was dealing with sort of Donald Trump before him that led to this, right? Really, in my mind, it was a key contributor to this really hard Brexit position because we were lining ourselves up with a trade deal with him and we were trying to think about the lowest prices we could offer on things so we couldn't stay part of the single market. By the way, we're now lined up to import Australian meat products which would not legally be allowed to be grown in this country. They still have battery cages, they still have slaughterhouses with no CCTV in them, and they've got hormone reared beef. So that's something to watch out for, people, if you eat meat. Paul and Laura are feeling quite smug right now, but I'm just going to read labels and maybe get a farm. In terms of the downside, I think I'm just looking at what my friends are outputting in terms of memes and like what they seem to have internalized from the whole thing. And what I'm seeing a lot of is memes sort of saying, yeah, they're social distancing for the camera, but then we've also got photos of them all snuggled together and all stood next to each other, and basically like they're putting more restrictions on you, but these people think they can do whatever they want. It's one rule for them and another rule for you. And I think that's very damaging, and the government should have put more work in place to really, you know, put a show on of extra social distancing if you have to, because the whole country are looking at you and really do expect you to do the very minimum of trying to stay 2 meters away from people.
No masks.
No
All cutting away without any masks and making masks. So Laura, I'm going to pick up something that Neil Terry said about them rolling out the non-political royal family. I mean, what did you make of that?
I don't, I'm perfectly honest, I don't know what that is.
So the first day, the royal family was rolled out in force. There was the Queen there, and then there was William and Kate, at least, and sort of they went round and talked to people and signed autographs and kissed babies and sort of, what were they doing there? So has anybody got a view on that?
Sounds like they were offering them a nice little holiday with some lovely little tourist attractions. Like,
I mean, I wonder whether
utterly
it's tied
pointless.
into our the one that you're going to be dealing with when you start talking is the UK sleepwalking into authoritarian rule. Why was this this royal family who have no political power in this country whatsoever within the constitution? Why are they taking part in a G7 summit at all?
I mean, I think the royal family is one of the government's best distraction tactics. There's always something happening. When the government do something really bad, something happens to the royal family to get in the news. Someone will have a baby or get engaged or go to hospital or something. So they've wheeled them out because they're a distraction, and they're, you know, a tourist attraction, and that we're meant to be all joyous about them. And I think also cutting it right down to the bare minimum, I also think that maybe Boris Johnson is using it as a bit of a power play. Like, look how important these people are, and they're coming and doing what I've told them to do, and we are your overlords kind of thing. It just feels really odd. It is odd to involve the royal family in any of this, because they're not political, and they shouldn't be, actually. It really odd. It does feel like they've just carted these people out for a holiday when they should have been getting down to business, really.
They're putting on a show rather than a proper summit. Stuart, what about the relationship with America? Do you think that moved forward or backwards? Do you think there was healing? And sort of also America, is it good to see America taking more interest in Europe than they have been doing under Trump? Or is it, in fact, were you happy with sort of being left alone to get on with it?
You know, looking at what I saw, you know, everybody was trying to be nice to each other, and the pleasantries, and, you know, they're all educated in diplomacy. But start to finish, it was a summit of the status quo. You know, I don't imagine that anything is going to be better between us and America at the end of it than at the start of it, other than knowing more people's names. You know, that's what I got out of it.
Sam sort of suggested that maybe actually America telling us off about Northern Ireland was a good thing. Do you agree with that?
We already knew. You know, day one, we already knew Joe Biden's stance on Ireland, you know, and, you know, it was pretty clear from then. It was just one of those things where it builds up to an event where people meet and intersect, and then it's a headline. You know, we already knew where people were what people were thinking, what people were saying.
Paul, everything I look at, I just get this tremendous feeling of underachievement, of a failure. Vaccines, we haven't released the patents, we've not met any kind of numbers. Economic recovery, it just seems that if you read the statement, it says nothing about it. It talks about what we've already done, not what we're going to do in the future. Green New Deal, it was just greenwash. Girls' education, a New Deal for Africa. It just seemed to be just words. Laura, I'm going to your wife first, Paul. Sorry, she indicated she wanted to speak. Laura.
Yeah, it was just what you touched on there about the African education. I saw a video of Boris Johnson saying he was pledging £90 million into education for African girls. And you thought, like, yeah, that's brilliant. So he's actually going to try and be an internationalist and realise that we need to help people, and girls especially, into education across the world. And so we've pledged 430 million to 90 different countries to help girls in education, which again they're bleating on about and making a big song and dance about, and it's fantastic until you actually find out that we used to pay 600 million, and we're not doing that anymore. So they're saying how wonderful it is, and that again feeds into something we'll talk about later on, about, you know, the lies and inaccuracies that the government is so happy to tout, and they've essentially cut the funding they're going to give to these girls, which is a big shame.
Paul, I'll go back to, thank you, Laura. That was really very helpful. I didn't know that. That's Paul, I mean, just a failure across the board?
I I don't know. It was illuminating in one way, in one way especially. Joe Biden had said he had made some sort of commitment to trying to get the patents released and to and to provide a load of vaccines and stuff. Is this a sign of weakness from Biden? Like he made some quite bold statements that they were going to do things and then he just didn't. The rest of the G7 didn't for whatever reason. Now, was he doing what Boris Johnson says, oh, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then not? Or was he making a genuine attempt to do these things and he failed to do so? It's really difficult to know what actually happened, but I do know that Britain is often very much like in these situations when you've got a Conservative government in particular, very, very reluctant to do the things that are necessary. And it comes back down to what I've said about like people being, the interests of politicians are the interests of the people who pay them. And we've seen this week that people in the Lords, that guy from the Lords had just done he wasn't recommended to be a Lord and then made a £500,000 donation to the Conservative Party and became a Lord despite the recommendation. And someone else was £150,000 straight after being admitted into the Lords and stuff. Like, I think we're probably going to talk about this stuff later on, but I think this is all linked together throughout the world. If money wins you elections, rather than the desire to help, then even those who do desire to help kind of get corrupted and get sucked into this thing. And I think with this awful political atmosphere where politics becomes that shit pantomime that I talked about last week, and it's just just trying to get one up on each other rather than genuinely trying to solve the problems, because we know what the problems are. The problems are very clearly identified. The problems are a system where we have laws that allow people to make money, a lot of money, out of just credit. It's not even capitalism anymore, is it? It's just credit. So we can solve the problems if we get people into positions of power that want to genuinely make a change. But I don't think that'll work. Actually, I think we're too far gone on this one. We see what happens to South American countries whenever they come up with something they're going to change. So there'll be a coup basically against them. That's what I mean. I think people are going to have to do this themselves, and for that they need, we need to wake up to this. Really, we need to wake up to the problem that they are not going to solve these problems. They never do. Actually, politicians do not do this on their own. So, yeah, it's depressing, but it's not new. I don't think it's not a new feeling that I have about it.
Thank you. Last word, Stuart. Saw you nodding there.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Paul a lot. That this isn't just what it looks like on the surface. There's more to it.
I think the general feeling of the team, people, is that, and certainly of the comments, is it worth the money? Answer: no. They need to meet. It's just a show and meaningless greenwash. Just show and greenwash. Okay, let's move on. Other questions? Well, you haven't heard it all before, because you're going to hear some things you've never heard before, because the team always comes up with those things. I will, however, remind the team that there's 10 minutes each on these, okay? So if you talk for 5, it's not fair. Right, so just sort of set your timer going. Samantha, what do we do? I know what I'm going to tell you what I would do to them. So what do we do about the booing of footballers who take the knee?
I mean, this is so difficult, and it goes back to what Paul was saying and what we said before about, you don't change minds by telling people that they're wrong. of course, I believe that booing footballers who are taking the knee is wrong, especially the black footballers who have experienced racism, and there is huge amounts of racism still in football, any kind of public life. I'm sure your mind would be blown if you saw some of the Twitter messages that these guys get on a daily basis. The battle is very much not won. I think there's a huge perception that racism doesn't happen anymore and we're past it, but it's really not the case. And like I said, when young black footballers themselves are talking about it, we really have to listen to them. But what do we do about it? What do we do about it long term? It's got to be about education, hasn't it? I was a religious studies teacher. That was all about teaching kids to argue with each other and to listen to each other and to debate in a constructive way. That kind of thing is being squeezed out of the curriculum, and it's all about learning to pass exams and learning by rote. And I just don't think we are growing young people in order to be able to debate constructively, and older people, well, you can't do very much about them. I don't think. I think that's something else that has to be dealt with in a different way. But yes, it's disappointing. Yes, I think it's the wrong thing to do. But how do we get out of it? That's the question.
Oh,
it's a very confused message, isn't it, at the moment, because we've got people who are booing footballers for taking the knee because they don't want someone else to tell them what to do and think, but they want to tell them what to do and think by not taking the knee. It's just taking the knee. It's just a thing, They think, I could do it anytime, and people are talking about being a political statement, and that shouldn't really happen in football. Where should Marcus Rashford not have got involved in the free school meals thing because he's a footballer? Should he just stick to kicking a ball? Or does he have a brain? Does he have a heart? Does he have a mind? Does he have all these things? Of course he does. Of course and of course the footballers also do. And they've shown more leadership on this issue than many people have. So I would be applauding them for it. Like I went to see Sunderland play in the playoff semi-final, and a few people booed when they took the knee, and I thought that was like it really bothered me at the time, and I was thinking it ruined the first few minutes of the game for me, to be honest, because I was thinking about it a lot. But people should be allowed to do whatever they want. If they want to boo, I think they can, but if they really want to boo their own team and their own national players who they are there to support, it's a bit paradoxical, really, that they would go and boo those people. I also agree with the idea that if we're going to think, right, okay, you're perfectly within your rights to boo, we should be perfectly within our rights to say you're an absolute moron. And the other aspect of it is as well, people were saying, well, we're actually doing it because of because of Marxism. Well, they don't know what Marxism is. They have no idea what Marxism is. Like, like when the England team scored the other day, were they going round going, oh my word, they've seized the means of production? It's an utter nonsense to say that this is a Marxist thing. I know Black Lives Matter, the organisation, the website and so on, are Marxists, but does anyone even know what being a Marxist is? I know people on the left who really don't know what Marxism is, and I know Marxists who really disagree with one another over what Marxism is, but I also know the basis of it is, it's whether you think that capitalists, like the rich, should be able to use that money to oppress workers. That would be an anti-Marxist if you think that the rich should be able to oppress the workers, and if you think the workers deserve a fair share of the pay and maybe to own their own business and partial owners and worker cooperatives and all that kind of thing. That's a Marxist idea. Is that really that extreme? Is that worth booing your own football team for? Or are they really just a bit racist and they don't want to hear about it?
Stuart, Mark Lungley says the problem is white fragility. Agree or not?
I don't know. I mean, it's clear that, racism can come from anywhere and anyone. you know, but I think there's this sense that when you see people, you know, football supporters, they're shouting, they're telling the players what they want them to do. You know, they're shouting, it's like, you've let me down here when they're booing them, and they're chuffed for them when they score a goal. And they feel like they have this very, I don't know, direct connection, like they have the right to tell these people what to do. And I don't think that, you know, is fundamentally something just to do with being white. You know, I'm part of British white society at the moment. I think it's a little bit broader than that. I've seen it happen in other places, but it's like, I don't like football. I've never really got it, and I think there's something inherently weird about, you know, booing people for having an opinion or being racist against people, when the game itself, it has an inherently a system in place to allow people to come from far away to play for your town. You know, I find that really weird.
Laura, last word.
I think I sort of think messaging has got a lot to do with this problem. There's some stats come out recently that apparently 55% of adults believe that Black Lives Matter has heightened racial tension. And that there's an assumption that people are just sick of hearing about it now. Like, okay, you've done that now, let's move on, as if suddenly decades and decades of oppression have suddenly been erased because we all kneeled once, you know. There's a lot of people who feel like they're just sick of hearing about the whole George Floyd thing. Yeah, it was really bad and everything, but can we move on? I think the messaging is really, really poor around this, and the education, and we say this about literally everything we talk about, the education isn't there. And it's not calling people stupid as such as just saying you haven't taken the time to understand what Black people have been through and are still going through. And it's made all the more difficult when our own Prime Minister won't condemn the people who are booing. You know, he won't come out and say, actually, that's bad and this is why. So it just gets left, and it's left to people like people in the media and footballers to do these things, to take this action to help educate, because the people who should be doing it aren't doing it, and it's just creating this big perpetual thing where the people who govern us can't be bothered, so the people who entertain us have to do it, and then the people who entertain us, people get bored of that, and it just becomes worse and worse, actually. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that.
I'm going to say something about this. I very rarely input into these conversations, but this week my 10-year-old granddaughter went on. She plays this Beat Saber, and she's very, very good at it. And she goes on YouTube, and she wanted to do something for Pride Week. She'd learned about it at school, and she went on. She gave a little talk. She said, "I'm doing this Beat Saber thing with rainbow-coloured blocks." Because people have the right to love whom they love. That was all she said. You have no idea the abuse that a 10-year-old child came into for saying that, and the parents for indoctrinating her, and the school for indoctrinating her to say it. And people are just scum. And it's quite simple. Sort of the people who take the knee to say that they value Black people's lives, they're not hurting you. There's no justification in booing that, except you think that Black people ought to stay in their boxes and not get out of their places because they are inferior and you are superior and you are a racist. And it's utterly unacceptable. And sort of when you have people on the terraces making monkey gestures and sounds at Black players, those people need fining. They need fining they lose their homes. And I'm to tell you the truth, I just come out against all these people who say, well, we need to educate people. Sod that. We've been educating people for half a century, and they won't listen because they're racist. They're racist scum. And that's it. That's the end of it for me. Right, second thing that I talked to. create some comments. Sort of the Seaham group, put that on, please. Put that on your thing. You're racist scum if you boo black people taking the knee because they believe that black people need equal respect to white people. You're just racist scum. There you go. Put it on. Don't give a damn. Laura, is the UK sleepwalking into authoritarian rule?
Yes, has been for quite some time. I think it'll come as no surprise to anybody here and probably anybody watching that our democracy is massively under threat. We are dealing now with, and has been proven to be the case. This is not even like it's hidden. We might be sleepwalking because we're not doing anything about it, but these things aren't hidden. Our government lie to us. They promise us the world and take things away instead. They threaten us. Our whole livelihoods are taken away. It's beyond, I feel like it's a game and the government are just trying to test us to see how much they can get away with. And they keep getting away with stuff. There's this clear divide between government's friends, government's colleagues, that they can get away with murder, genuinely can get away with murder. And no one is saying anything. Well, obviously, some of us are shouting about it, but it's fallen on deaf ears, and they now have managed to get themselves into this situation where they technically have absolute power. And at what point can we do anything about it? And it's getting further and further and further down the line, and less is being done. And we've talked about this many a time, as you know, John. We always talk about how people are just so desperate to just survive and get through the day that they're not going to challenge these things because they haven't got the time or the willpower or probably the energy to do it, or even the understanding of how big of an issue this is. And we mentioned, I think it was on Saturday's show on Socialist Night Live, about things that seemed so radical of an idea, things that seemed so far-fetched, like The Handmaid's Tale or even like the Hunger Games, now almost feel like, do you know, I could see how that could happen because we're not a stone's throw away from it. And the worry is that people aren't realizing how close we are to that. Our democracy is gone. Once our democracy is gone, we are essentially being ruled by an upper class, a ruling class, who's quite happy to stay that way and has proven time and time again that they don't care about lower middle classes, people who need help from other countries. They simply don't care. And we are being left and we're being thrown to the wolves, and it's terrifying.
So I think it's Paul who keeps saying that 1984 was meant to be a warning, not a handbook for how to do it. Stuart, where does what Laura, I mean, by the way, Anne, authoritarian rule is just where the government has too much power. It's as simple as that, where democracy is dead and the government just tells you what to do. And we may have the trappings and the illusion of democracy, but it doesn't work. And at the end of the day, the government is just telling us too much things. Stuart, the question is, where does that cease to be a valid comment and run into this kind of anti-mask conspiracy theory that sort of that the world is being run by a gang of lizard pedophiles and sort of who are reducing us to slaves by making us wear masks and socially distance. So I mean, I find it very difficult to get those two messages where they don't run into each other.
Well, that's the answer, isn't it? They're not inherently separate. If you want to smash somebody's argument with very little effort, you just point it's a conspiracy theory, and if it's, you can get away with a lot of that at the moment. Facts and figures in the modern world, they're not as valuable as they used to be. Evidence doesn't seem as powerful as it once was. Testimony and knowledge aren't as valuable. It's almost, we're living in the age where the kind of the intellectual and the expert class has died because we have the internet, and now conspiracy is no longer mutually exclusive from what's actually going on, is it?
Wow, Stuart, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Ruth Davison, Paul, says, do you think COVID has given more scope to do this? Or do you think we're being unfair? And that basically we find ourselves in a war situation, a war with a disease, and the government had to do all these things. Paul, what do you reckon? Is this just a spin-off from COVID, or is it the government taking advantage of COVID?
I think it's probably the government taking advantage of COVID mixed with, like, I think there's a lot of confusion and just being bad in there that, like, you know, that's looked worse than it is. I think they did have to make some decisions around COVID that looked very authoritarian, although they probably shouldn't have enforced them with laws and what have you. They should have tried to have appealed to people's better nature and just seen what happened, you know, but then also like done things like, right, we're going to have to shut schools, etc. And you know, there were things that they could have done a lot better, but this isn't just been under COVID that this has been happening. Like, you know, so the four markers of an authoritarian leader is rejecting or showing weak commitment to democratic rules. We've had the prorogation of Parliament. We had all that mess over Brexit, and actually it was on both sides as well, because could, you know, other people who tried to deny Brexit, you know, could that be considered to be authoritarianism? And actually you voted for that, but we think you voted wrong, so we're going to take you another poll. That could be a sign of authoritarianism as well. So it's not just one-sided here. Denying the legitimacy of political opponents. We saw Jeremy Corbyn absolutely dragged through the mud. And we also see things like in the prevent strategy, they say if you know, and in the education policy, if you oppose capitalism, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to teach people about anything that is in opposition to capitalism, denying the legitimacy of political opponents. Encouraging or tolerating violence, that's another marker. You know, how we've seen what happened after the Sarah Everard protests. You know, they encouraged that violence, and also the Boris Johnson's former advisor on race equality has said there's going to be another Joe Cox or another. You know, there could be another thing because of the way the media and the government are whipping up racial hatred, and a readiness to stifle or limit civil liberties of opponents, including the media. We've seen this from Cameron's time when they said, look, you know what, we fund the BBC, and if you don't toe the line, we might think about not funding you. This has been going on for ages. This is not a new thing, but it is that slow creep towards it. And I think gradually we've accepted more and more. Well, people have accepted more and more of it. We haven't.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, you did go very quickly, but we only have 10 minutes for each of these, and you had a lot to say. Paul, those four pillars of anti-democratic rule, can we find some way to put them up on social media?
I'll stick the link on. It's an article about Donald Trump. But yeah.
We just need the four titles. Samantha, very, very quickly, please, because we're eating into our last topic.
So last night, Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, ripped into the government because they are repeatedly announcing things to the press before they announce them in the House of Commons. This is really basic, easy stuff to get right, okay? It's not difficult. And this is also part of the problem, you know, that we've got Boris Johnson, who was actually found to be in contempt of Parliament, prorogued it illegally, and now is refusing to do basic things like announce things to members of Parliament so they can be scrutinised properly, rather than announcing them to a group of hand-selected journalists that he knows what they're going to ask him, you know? So this is another thing that feeds into this idea of an authoritarian state. The scrutiny is not there. They're changing the rules to suit themselves. And again, there's no comeback for it.
Thank you for your brevity there, Sam. I think the answer to the question is yes. Anne's lost the thread of the four things, which Sam, we might come back to and just flesh out. The idea, Anne, was that sort of the various ways you can recognise an authoritarian government when that has too much power. These are the four ways you recognise it. And what Paul did is he mentioned the four, and then he gave factual proofs which show that this government meets those criteria. Last of all, Stuart. I suppose this feeds into our last question. I mean, is this the same kind of thing? We're about to have a parliamentary reorganisation. We're going to gain Samantha and lose Paul in Sedgefield. Paul and Laura are off. You're going. You're abandoning us. You're being taken from us. Instead, we have Samantha coming in to come and take control, and we're losing two MPs. Stuart, is this what's your take on this then?
I don't know whether it's more democratic or less democratic. The numbers would suggest, we're getting a fairer share regarding our population with representatives in Westminster. But on paper, we would be losing two Labour MPs. I think it's Tyneside North and Sunderland South would just essentially cease to exist and be incorporated into other areas. If you actually look at the boundary review, there's lots of little tiny tidbits that stand out to me. I know I was driving past Wingate Village, and we had a look at the map later on, and Wingate Village is cut right in half. And it's quite a wealthy little place, isn't it? You got your footballers and whatnot living there. And I was like, why have they chosen to do this? And it to me, in my mind, it was so that you had two MPs talking up your community in Parliament, and other places like communities have been cut in half along lines that make no sense whatsoever. It's on paper, it seems really democratic and a better way of doing stuff. In reality, it's a nightmare.
Laura, is it going to destroy Wingate? Is it a solution which ruins the integrity of your little township?
No, I don't think it'll destroy Wingate. Wingate's pretty strong. I don't think it goes directly through our village. It goes sort of near it, and I think sort of the Castle Eden end, but that doesn't belong to us anyway. So we'll be a brand new constituency. Easington will be turning into Peterlee and Seaham, I think, and we'll be part of that. It'll be devastating. Actually, I've really, we've worked hard in Sedgefield and we've loved it, and it's kind of part of our personality and a sense of who we are now. So it's going to be weird. But the village here is, they're really good people, and they'll get on anywhere. And it means that we still have the Easington and the Sedgefield MP seats are still there. So we won't necessarily suffer from having to be amalgamated into one, which is just going to be the same number. But it's hard. Like, I agree with Stuart. It's like, is it the worst thing to happen? I don't know. It paints a picture when all the MPs who are losing their seats are Labour. Will we ever win again? I don't know.
Paul, Neil Terry says that the boundary changes are a distraction. We need a proportionate voting system. I mean, do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I think we need a complete overhaul of the system. I think we need to move away from Westminster. I think we need to have a bottom-up power system. I would much rather have, say, the most important people being local representatives, and then they select their local representative to go further up and so on, and just have that power in a local place. So yeah, I agree that it should be proportional representation, but I also think that we need a massive, massive overhaul of the entire thing. The entire thing's designed to intimidate people and keep people away. Like, you know, I've walked outside of Westminster. You just look at this grand place and you're like, this isn't for me. This place is not like, you know, I don't belong here. My class don't belong here. It's designed to intimidate people. And, you know, and it does, you know, but it's exactly like Eton. And that's why you have so many prime ministers coming from Eton. The entire system is designed to retain what it has so that, you know, you're never going to really make a massive change. So we need to make a massive change in another way. So I'm not really... it's an important thing to do. It's the system that we have at the moment. You play the system that you've got. However, I do not think that is the best solution in order to make people's lives all over the country better. So I would change things around. I would also want to mention as well that levelling down the number of MPs in the North East isn't really what we were promised locally. You know, so less representation for people who are underrepresented anyway is not a good way forward.
Thank you. Hello, Heather Swallow. We're just about to finish, but it's good to see you right at the end. Sam, last comment to you. Do you think that this is just a Tory trick to put themselves in power for forever?
It's hard to say that, isn't it? Because the Boundary Commission is supposed to be a completely politically impartial organisation. However, it has resulted in a situation where you would get more Tory MPs, less Labour MPs. And also when you look at the other things that the government are doing to game the system in their advantage, the way they're lying on the TV and they know they can just get away with it. All they have to do is not resign, which is what people used to do when they were full of shame, but these people have no shame. When you look at the fact they're going to bring in voter ID, which is, we know will disproportionately affect the poorest in society. Even if they do bring in an ID card which is free, it's going to be, there will be less take up among the most deprived communities. And we know that Conservative voters are really good at turning out to vote. And, you know, you could ask a Conservative voters to do a math test before they voted and there'd be no effect on their vote because they are solid voters, because they know what they're voting for and they know they're voting in their own self-interest and they are fine with that. So I think when you look at that in the context of all of those things, the context of the fact that we know we've got a government that are willing to call an election in December, which has just happened, which is always going to be designed to reduce turnout and reduce ability to campaign. The fact that we got a government that did an election during a pandemic when we had reduced ability to campaign, you know, I think it's clear that they're willing not to play by the rules and to rewrite the rules to keep themselves in power, which is very, very difficult.
Thank you. And on that bombshell, hardly a bombshell, Sam, I'm sorry. But sort of on that bombshell, that is the end of today's show. I have to thank the team. They are just fabulous. Thank you for your insights and your comments. Thank you to the people who commented on the chat stream. It's always a delight to see what you're saying. Always impressed by what you say. Thank you very much indeed. There's a comment there from Mark Longley about regional devolution, which we may want to pick up in the second half. Anyway, you know what happens now, people. We go away. I promise off some more fizzy water. We have a little bit of a break. And when we come back, Sam's in charge. And the idea is that you say things to us on the chat, and then we respond. And it becomes much more interactive than the main show. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, team. You're brilliant. See you in 5 minutes. God bless. Bye.
My name is Jack Atkins and I'm not afraid. And I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist's a dead one, they say. And a rhyme, a real we are. When I first left all them months ago, I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. Well, for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure. Panorama we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. I told my mother, now mother, be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm a real we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today. Cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past us first. And around here we are. There'll be no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here, no pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. No pass around, no pass around, no pass around today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pass around here today.
Hello, it is me. I am here. I am in charge. Ah!
And John's been reduced to just letters.
I've got the power Goodness me, John didn't hold back, did he? Oh man. That's what happens when he's free. And we're going to hear some very revolutionary comments from John in the future, I'm sure. Do we need regional devolution, i.e. a Northern Assembly, a Midlands Assembly like the Welsh and Scottish do? It's a really good question. Anybody want to weigh in on that one? Paul says yes. Yeah.
I was happy to go. I'm aware I spoke quite a lot during the main show, and I was trying to give other people a chance. I think I'd like to see more localized power, but I don't know whether that would be the way I would like to see it, because again, those assemblies are limited by Westminster quite a lot. Again, I want something. My idea would be to have something that feeds up from the bottom, so have some real localized power, and the local power gives power to Westminster rather than Westminster giving power. Like, there are certain things like national security and all that you do probably need to have a countrywide thing, but I'd like to see more cooperation worldwide there. Like, I'd like to see communities feeding into counties, and then counties feeding into the country, and then countries feeding into the world. That's what I'd like to see. This coming together of people and empowering more people and making it a more inclusive thing. And politics shouldn't be a spectator sport. Everyone should be involved in it. It shouldn't be that stupid pantomime that I keep talking about. It should be something that changes people's lives and involves everyone. And that's very hard. It's very easy to do the top-down thing, and that's why it's easy to do the authoritarian thing. So a form of greater devolution would be really, really good, but I don't want devolution. I want the power to come from the bottom up, rather than them saying, oh, we'll devolve you some of the powers. I want them to say, actually, we've got the power, and we'll give you, we'll send that upwards.
Yeah, I really like your idea about feeding power up. I mean, it's no secret the fact that Bishop Auckland constituency and Newton Aycliffe and Sedgefield constituency will be looking for a new MP sometime soon. And what the people tell us is they would like to see somebody local with roots and passion for the area become an MP for the area. But we know it is likely that there will be people who put themselves forward on sort of 8 to 10 shortlists across the country, and are basically just playing the numbers game in order to get a seat in Parliament. And these are people who, have a lot more means than you and I, who have the money to finance that kind of political networking that you need to do before that to get yourself onto all of these lists. The backing of the family to maybe have done lots of unpaid internships in organizations who get them through the door so they can get on those lists. That's the type of thing that we're talking about. And that's even in the Labour Party, so it's really disappointing that there is this huge disconnect between the parliamentary governance and the local governance. And you would think that wouldn't exist, but unfortunately it really, really does.
I think as well, I think funnily enough, it's probably slightly easier if you're working class, if you were horrible, to become a working class Tory than it is to get a seat in Labour, because there's hardly any of them, so you can just rock up and be like, I'm a working class Tory, and then they'll probably give you a nice they'll probably give you a run at a seat somewhere, because that's the image they want to portray. Whereas within the Labour Party, there's a lot of things that dictate whether or not you're going to get even a chance to represent yourself to members, if that's even given. So yeah, it's again the Labour Party. I don't know why the Labour Party decides to structure itself exactly like every other party. Well, not exactly like it, but I don't understand why it has to come top down either. I don't understand why we have to have a leader in the traditional sense. There could be all sorts of different ways of doing leadership, and why do we have to follow this pattern that seems to be set down? It's like if there was one formation in football and everyone had to do it. It's like you can do all sorts of different things. There you go.
Has anybody else got any specific opinions about regional assemblies? Do you think a regional assembly would work for us? Laura?
I have trouble
Like
with
how
things like
regional?
that because... Sorry. You go, Stuart.
Like how regional are we talking here? Because like the northeast, you know, if that's a big place, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you know, and kind of the stuff going on in one area is completely different to another. Like how regional would you want it?
That's a good question. And there's actually a suggestion that we might have a North Mayor that covers the whole of the Newcastle, Northumberland, right down to here, right down to County Durham. I'm not sure that's what people want either. Go on, Laura.
I was just going to say that I have a bit of an issue with that because I would love to see us have a bit more control over what happens to us because especially in the north we do get forgotten about quite a lot. But again, with what Paul was saying, with the structures in place at the minute, with the top-down power structures, it really depends on who gets elected in, who gets in charge, you know. If you get someone who's just loves a bit of capitalism, you know, versus someone who's really grassroots and wants to help everybody, that the idea of a devolved system could look really different every 4 years or 5 years or whatever. It could look really, really damaging or really, really incredible. And I worry that being down to like one person or a few people is really scary. And I think Paul's right. We need to have a look at different methods of governance, I guess, or leadership or representation. Because at the minute, it's just not working. There's too many egos, and I include the Labour Party in that. Far too many egos who just want to do it because they can get a paycheck out of it or some notoriety or something. And yet there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who are Labour Party members who do it because they care, and it feels weird that there's a disconnect between those people not being able to progress. So yeah, I think the system's not rigged in favour of a good devolution, even though I would support it in theory if we could do it properly, if that made any sense at all.
John, what do you feel about regional assemblies?
I'll talk about devolution briefly. We rejected. I wasn't right happy about it, but we and Durham County Council rejected going in with the rest of the LA7 to form a northeast regional devolved authority, and they did so. I was very anxious that they might do so because if we could have just got those 7 authorities together, working together to pursue a communal economy drive, a communal climate drive, a communal regeneration drive, it would have been so much better for us to do that. But they were worried about the fact that the Tory model of devolution is based on mayors and sort of on Ben Houchen. And sort of it's all tied in with what Laura was talking about earlier about the fact that we are heading towards an authoritarian country. It's all based around putting power into small groups, into oligarchs, or into single people, and that's very, very worrying. And it's only when people like Paul talk about different models where sort of it's more messy, but it's more democratic, where we have groups of people where ideas filter upwards, where those officers see their job as being to implement the wishes of the people rather than their bosses, and that's the thing. So am I for devolution? No, not necessarily. I think it's got lots of advantages in terms of giving us more say. But if it's going to be a mayoral system, I'm very hostile for reasons that you've said.
We've also got
I'm
like
gonna-
the. Sorry, I was just. I wonder how interested someone like Boris Johnson would be in being, doing the hard work at a local level. Can you imagine him slogging his guts out? Like, say, if the power went down a lot, and that's where the power actually was, would he be there, or is he there to be a celebrity? And is this breeding the wrong type of person to get themselves into those massive things of power that, like, that we couldn't possibly touch? If you like kind of made it less of a big celebrity position being a prime minister, would it attract, like, would the powerful positions attract people who are more likely to make the right decisions, or more or less likely to do it for the wrong reasons?
It's a really good question. We should start play. You know how they've got the masked singer? Yeah, we should do the masked prime minister for the rest of time. Anne says, "What's a regional assembly? A regional assembly is where you elect people to another body which has certain powers over local things. So similar to the council, but a bit bigger with a bit more power, really." Colin says that his concern is with limited powers granted, a devolved northeast would simply be a scapegoat for government failings. And we do see that a lot in Scotland, the government trying to blame the Scottish government for stuff that they've done. And of course, we get that with the local council. The government's always blaming the council for not doing things that the council hasn't got the money to do because the government hasn't given them the money to do it. One thing I found was interesting. I've been listening to the Politico podcast. There you go, 2 mentions of Politico in this show. And it was about the rise of the SNP. And they said really that the creation of the devolved administration in Scotland was actually politically a huge own goal for the Labour Party, because the Labour Party being in power then gave the Scottish nationalists a place where they could gain power and act as like people were voting for the SNP in the Scottish Parliament in order to hold the Westminster government to account down there. So it's one of those things, like right now would probably be a good time to set up a regional assembly, because that might happen for us. Like the Labour Party might grow in popularity to oppose the Westminster government. However, that is by no means guaranteed. We could get a far right party pop up. We could see the growth of the Northeast Party and see it evolve into a more far right, for example, body, and have that basically take control over the Northeast. So it's a Pandora's box of what you're going to get out the end of it. So I don't think a regional assembly is the answer, because I think that we need to be making sure that we take our space in Westminster and we don't let them just control that. We should be sending our people down there. But we've talked about what problems come with that and what things stand in our way to doing that, unfortunately. Oh man, it's complicated, isn't it?
I mean, the thing about it is, Sam, is that the Scots have MPs in Westminster looking after their interests there, but they have their own regional assembly. The Welsh have MPs at Westminster looking after their interests there, but they have a significant amount of control over the way things happen in Wales. And I think in the right way, it's very attractive, the idea that you could do this for the north of England, perhaps set up something, draw a line across from the Humber to the Mersey, and sort of take Leeds, Liverpool upwards, and make it into a kind of a north of England sort of regional government, devolved government. Sort of that has, I think that has real possibilities. And then we could go our own way to the degree that the Scots have gone their own way. And we could keep holding them to account by saying we wanted independence for the north of England, a resurrection of the state of Northumbria. And and then they'd have to let us have more powers. I think that's very attractive. I think it's worked well for Scotland and for Wales, and I can see that working well for the north of England. What I do not agree with is this Ben Houchen thing, which is just basically pour a bit of money in to let the Tories take credit for sort of the peanuts they're throwing to the Teesside. That's nothing.
And also, there's obviously the concern now that the Conservatives and the Liberal coalition has control of Durham County Council, that they're going to pour some money in here and therefore solidify their base there. And that would be bad politically, but I have a strong suspicion that the money is not going to come. And that is even more of an insult. Like, even when we're on the cusp of taking you and really solidifying power here, actually we think so little of you that we're not going to try. We will get some scraps. We will get some. Oh dear me! I'm allowed to say what I want. It's my show.
Isn't there a decision that they made to not put something in Stanley? And it was put somewhere in the Bishop Auckland constituency. Wasn't there something about? I saw that recently, some piece of investment which suggested that Stanley's in North Durham, isn't it? Constituency, and it's where there's like a Labour MP, so they're making decisions at county level, perhaps. I don't know.
I think that what happened there was that it's this money that the government's giving. 20 million pounds to each constituency for regeneration, and the new authority in Durham County Council has come up with limited bids and no bid at all for the Stanley area. They've not bid for anything. And that was being actually unfairly compared with what they've got for Bishop Auckland. But Bishop Auckland is old money that's been got under other bids altogether. So it was like comparing apples with pears. And here am I defending the joint administration. But it is unsatisfactory that they have not made sufficient bids against that money for Sedgefield as well as for Stanley. They should have been much better than they have. That's what
Tim's referencing the letter from Kevin Jones. That's all I'm talking about. I don't know very much about the situation, but I know Kevin Jones was bringing it up.
Yes, that's right. Well, he was just disappointed that they'd not managed to do anything for that constituency whatsoever. No bid put in at all.
We will see, which is the point I was making.
Tell me about the Toft Hill bypass, Sam. This is typical, because what's happened is that, and they did it when can you remember that they had all this huge plan for transport, and when it actually came to giving the money for it, they sort of gave a quarter of the money, and it had to be slashed, the North Transport Plan. And they've done very much the same, or it may be connected, all part of the same, with this Toft Hill bypass, haven't they?
Yeah. So going to Cabinet tomorrow is a proposal for the Levelling Up Fund, which will include money for the Stockton and Darlington Railway route, which of course I'm 100% in favour of, and I think I can see how that does level up, because we are growing the tourism in a severely deprived part of the community, and that will bring visitors and economic growth to Shildon. So I'm not going to say anything about that. However, the two other things that are being proposed as part of this levelling up bid is half of the Toft Hill bypass. So the original Toft Hill bypass would have bypassed West Auckland as well, but they're only funding half of it, so it will kick out traffic through West Auckland. And the Walton Bridge. Walton Bridge, again, I'm sure it is a very worthy thing to fund, but we're talking about the levelling up fund to level up connectivity, which is supposed to promote economic growth. Walton has a population of about 300 people, and I can't see the economic benefit to fixing that bridge, to be honest, but I'm sure the officers at Durham County Council will explain that fully when I watch the cabinet meeting tomorrow. But the real thing about this West Auckland problem is that there was no consultation at all with the people of West Auckland, no consultation with the councillors from West Auckland, and suddenly we find there's a bypass which is going to kick all of the traffic that did go through Toft Hill through West Auckland. The people of West Auckland obviously are not happy about that. They are mobilising. They had a public meeting tonight. But unfortunately, all it has to do is go through a cabinet tomorrow morning, and then the application is going to go into the government for the funding. There is absolutely no scope for criticising or debating this decision and going through the rigour of council, going through the scrutiny process. It's not at all. So it's a disappointing start for an administration that seemed to try to say that it was going to be transparent and open to scrutiny. We'll just have to see how it goes.
Are they allowed? I mean, I thought that Walton Bridge was going to be funded out of Durham County Council money. They'd already made that decision, and sort of, I'm prepared to be wrong on this, but are they not just trying to now take it out of the regenerate, out of the levelling up money? And are they? The question that was asked about that is that, does Cabinet have the right to overturn a previous full council decision? And it's the same with this extra money that they're going to give to every county council. Every county council is going to be given £10,000 extra. We rejected that on a vote in the February full council meeting. Here we are, March, April, May, 4 months later, and the Cabinet, by executive power, is overturning that full council vote and just saying, oh, well, we've decided that the councillors can have £10,000. What kind of way is that to run a council? And do they even have, I mean, I'm presuming that they've taken legal advice. I mean, has anybody asked the question at County Hall, Sam, about whether they have the right to do what they're doing at Cabinet?
It's a really good question. I mean, what is disappointing? I mean, I'm glad. So for anybody who is outside of County Durham, we have a system in Durham County Council where every councillor is given some money, £19,000, just a bit over a year, to invest in their communities on community projects and things. And the joint administration have agreed that every council is going to get an extra £10,000 this year, which is obviously very good, but the money is coming out of the overall AAP budget for towns and villages. So while it's not new money, and some communities who have more councillors than others in their AAP area are going to be affected by this in different ways, and the AAPs that are going to come off worse in terms of losing the more money out of their overall ability to invest in their community are the sort of Easington and Seaham area, some of our most deprived communities. So It is robbing Peter to pay Paul. I'm not complaining because I've got extra money to spend on things that I think are great. I'm sure that was the rationale behind it, but it does mean less scrutiny because it's less. You don't have to build up a bid to go through your AAP board. It's your local councillor's neighbourhood budget, and they get a lot more scope of what they decide to spend it on. I think Chris should come on the show because I can't really read his comments and digest them and bring them into the discussion right now. But yes, Vonnie, you are right. By taking it out of the AAP budget, it takes the control and local decision making away from the community itself. The AAPs have a board which is constituted from people from the community who get to make the decisions about where the funding is spent, rather than just me sending an email saying, yes, I'd like to fund this project.
Chris Hood's point is valid, that there will be future opportunities to bid against this money, and these are just preliminary bids, and there will be future opportunities. The danger is that as the money is given out, will it still be there?
Yeah, there are two different things at play there. I mean, the more bids go in, the more deadlines go in, the more people are going to get excited about other people being approved money, and there's going to be more applications in. So I would love to think that the council will manage to successfully get applications for all of its constituency areas, but I don't think that is entirely likely. Anyway, where are we at? Laura's been
Chris Hood. Carl Marshall was portfolio. He could have applied for it in March 2021. It's Carl Marshall and Labour's fault that it didn't go in. So how stupid of us not to realise that it was all Labour's fault.
Yeah. Despite the fact that the funding bid has to be worked up with an MP. So if it's Carl Marshall's fault, it's some other MP's fault as well.
Kevin Jones. Kevin Jones is for that area. Yeah. Did you see the little bit of debate earlier on? It was quite funny when people were talking about which words were blocked, and they were trying to get the words up. There's certain swearing blocked on the stuff that comes up, and because I can see one here from Steve Bird. It's always great to see, although it's always great to see the red hours, it was perhaps slightly ironic to see them entertaining delegates at a summit with climate change and reduction of greenhouse G star because it's blocked out asses on the agenda. So it looks like he's sworn in the middle of it, but it's actually just covering up asses. So the team costs around 10 million a year, would pay for a few school meals. Important point, that, isn't it? You're saying, let's reduce our greenhouse gases, and now here are the red arrows. Let's burn some kerosene.
Somebody else said that Boris Johnson flew to
and Extinction Rebellion blocked the exit with some buses or with something. They built some sort of barricade or something, but it was all right because Biden had already flown off in a helicopter. So they were making the point that, let's do something about climate change, and he'd already gone in his helicopter. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a discussion about trains earlier, and they're saying we're looking at potentially we're looking past hydrogen power now. They're looking at powering them with ammonia. I don't know how that works. But I thought it was very interesting.
I mean, what with ammonia? What are we going to power? Trains?
Yeah.
We'll see if that's true if anybody who's an MP starts investing in it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Speaking of, we didn't even mention that about Gove, did we? like Gove getting the contract that he actually had shares in, and everyone said, "Oh, Gove should resign," and then they went, "Look over there," and what happened?
It was
They took down the picture of the Queen. Yeah, they took down a picture of the Queen in Oxford, so they were like, "That's headline news. That's our headline. It's a slow news day. Let's take some students have decided they don't want a picture of the Queen up anymore. That is a bigger story than our government being proven to have acted unlawfully in the awarding of contracts in which a government minister benefited. Look over there." Shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, in the good old days, that would have been, he would resign, wouldn't he? He would resign in disgrace, but they have no disgrace.
See, my
There are no
theory on this is that they're doing this on purpose. If you remember what happened with Tony Blair, what they did was they didn't go straight for Tony Blair because he was so popular. What they did was they picked away at the sort of cordon of ministers round him, and and they just took one at a time until they'd all gone, and then that left Tony Blair terribly exposed. And the question is, why is Johnson not sacking these incompetent people? Why is he not sacking these obviously corrupt people? And there's because they have serve a very useful purpose. They absorb all the anger, and they just keep on absorbing it because he won't remove them. And so Williamson and his incompetence, and Hancock and Priti Patel, who said it's all right to boo coloured people. I mean, these.
Remember, John? Is that what she said? Is that a quote?
She said it's all right to boo people footballers taking the knee, and so I was exaggerating, and these people, everybody rails at them, and they are a cordon sanitaire around Boris Johnson. That's why he's invulnerable. And as they begin to fall, you'll see Boris Johnson become increasingly destabilized, and then he'll go. That's why they're not doing anything about it. That's why he's not taking any action.
I just think it's more to do with just making sure that everyone seems equally corrupt. I think they like the idea that every politician is equally corrupt and all these things. Look at that, that's another politician. It's another politician. Doesn't matter what colour tie they're wearing. It's just another politician doing something awful. And I think that's been quite a successful strategy as well. And I think part of that, you can link this back to 2015 when a lot of people in the Labour Party thought that and they wanted to see something different, and they brought in Corbyn, and then Corbyn, everyone's like, he's a nice man, but he could never be leader because he doesn't want to be leader. He's not ambitious enough or whatever. And then later on, I read a quote from Margaret Hodge saying what a wonderfully lovely man Jeremy Corbyn was. But, he doesn't have the leadership qualities that are needed. And within a year, she was screaming at him that he was an effing anti-Semite in his face, allegedly. Well, I don't even think that is allegedly. I think it was confirmed. So, you can see how these things change and how they try to change the narrative all the time. It's all a game. It's not about helping people. It's not about changing lives. It's about a game to some people.
Talking about anti-Semitism, did any of you attend the anti-Semitism training session last night?
I did. Vonnie's just mentioned, I think it was because you used the word colour, John. Coloured, which is a very old-fashioned term. I think people of colour is acceptable. But...
Did I say that?
Yeah.
I think you did it. I think you did it in the cheat.
On record.
That's why I was asking.
Forever and ever.
That's why I asked if it was a quote, because I thought you were quoting Priti Patel.
Yes, absolutely unacceptable. Yeah, absolutely. Just a little bit excited. I went as well. What did you reckon to it?
I was only able to go for the first 15 minutes because I had an executive meeting of my trade union and I'm the president, so I kind of have to chair them. I thought it was a very unusual an unusual way to present the beginning. It was very much like the Labour Party are evil, we've broken the law, which I thought was, I don't know whether it was accurate, but yeah. You know, I'll watch the whole thing because it's available again, isn't it?
I was horrified by the poor quality of it.
I couldn't go. Frustratingly, I had a Labour Party meeting, so I couldn't attend the Labour Party training on anti-Semitism. But I will make every effort to attend it and to, yeah.
Leanne Powell was very unimpressed with it. It was nothing, Leanne, I thought it was nothing to do with the Labour Party. It did not meant it was all the examples she took seemed to be from interwar Europe. There were occasional ones from interwar Britain, and the evidence of anti-Semitism was taken from places like America and France, and you just thought, well, what has this got to do with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? And to tell you the truth, I was knocking for that through to almost the very end when they whipped round and said, "Oh, and we've got to be kind to Jewish people because they don't like us talking all the time about the excesses of the Israel state in Gaza and Palestine. They don't like it being mentioned. It's very distressing for them that it's just mentioned over and over and over again, obsessively, and which is a fair comment. But nevertheless, I wondered how this history lesson, which was a very poor and talked about waves of immigrants, by the way, I wondered how this was meant to help us understand how to make Jewish Labour members feel more comfortable in the party or form at all. One of the things they mentioned was the blood libel, which have you ever heard anybody mention it in Setchfield CLP? I mean, or allude to it, and you just thought this is a history lesson. That's wasting my time. I think they're going to have to do better on the training. I do think there is a need for training, but what they offered was useless.
I wonder why they were saying about Israel, because Israel don't do, if Israel's government make a mistake, they don't make it because of their Jewishness. It's nothing to do with religion at all. It's to do with the way governments run.
They made it very clear, Paul, that you're allowed to criticize the actions of the state, of the Israeli government. They made it very clear that that is allowed, that it's not anti-Semitic. What they did point out, which I thought was very useful, was that context is everything. And in certain things which are okay in one context, in another context, are not okay. So I thought that was a fair comment. But it was. I agree with Leanne. It was very unimpressive.
Okay, last question. Going back to the discussion about taking the knee and whether football fans who boo people who take the knee are racist. This is from Vonnie. It's a good question. Are the media, she didn't put it as a question, but I'm putting it as a question, are the media using issues like this to drive division within communities intentionally?
I don't know whether it's intentional or whether it's just that awful attitude they have. Is Nigel Farage putting out some sort of grand plan of how he does things, or is he just a bigoted, weird fella who's absolutely obsessed with things? It's sometimes really difficult to know. It probably doesn't matter. They are creating division by what they're saying. Whether or not they're trying to is a very difficult question to know the answer to. Is it intentional, or is it just sheerly because that's who they are, that's the way they behave? They are they are of a certain type of person who tends to get themselves in charge of these papers people who've inherited a fortune tend to be those kind of people, and they tend to have these views, and some of them tend to have these views and tend to want to display those views and share those views, and whether or not they're intentionally trying to drive a wedge between communities is debatable, but they certainly are. That's the outcome, isn't it?
Do you have an opinion, Stuart?
Yeah. Like when you watch reality TV, and a lot of it is just like anger and hate. And it's clearly because it's not because these people are angry or hateful when they're being filmed. It's the easiest kind of human emotion to express, when you're asked to express something. And I think the media goes around creating things to make money, and anger, hate is the easiest, cheapest, quickest way to get people to buy your stuff, because there's no obligation to tell the truth, is there for them? There's very little in the way that they have to abide by any rules. I think it's just so easy for them to be hateful.
And John?
I agree with Stuart. I don't think that the media is made up of individual journalists doing what they see as their job. Divide and rule is a well-tested and tried way of running a government and staying in power. But the individual journalists, I don't think they are party to any sort of grand plan in that. I think what the media does do, however, it ups the dramatization of issues. Everything they don't downplay issues. They continually exaggerate and upplay issues to try and make the biggest splash that they can. And so there's never anything small. It's always big, and they're continually trying to look for the most controversial way that they could represent these, because that sells newspapers and gets people watching. And I think the result is hatred and extremism. And I don't know what you do about it. They don't have the same problem in other countries as they do here. We're worse than any other country at this, and you just wonder why that is the case.
It's not just our country, but it is the countries where the Murdoch press have a big foothold. So they have USA, Australia, UK, and I'm sure I read something about it's everywhere where Rupert Murdoch is. There's a lot more hateful attitude in the media. Maybe it's because Rupert Murdoch hates people. Have you seen that that guy? I think he was the one who started Fox News or something. There was I think Russell Crowe played him in this TV series, and Rupert Murdoch was there, and they reckon it was Rupert Murdoch was really, really pushing for the Iraq War. They reckon it was him who had a huge amount of influence on invading Iraq after 9/11, because he thought that was a good idea. He wanted us to invade Iraq. He wanted the Western world to invade Iraq for reasons, I don't know, because it was totally unrelated to 9/11.
What do you reckon to this GB News with Andrew Neely stuff? What's all that about, Paul?
It's about people who like to shout and say right-wing things, who were actually quite mainstream in the media. It's Andrew Neil, he's one of the most right-wing commentators that you would get on TV anyway, and he's gone over there, and it's like, oh yes, he's a hard-hitting journalist. Well, he's not. He's really, really right-wing. He might ask a few difficult questions of some conservative people, but generally his political beliefs are right there. You would never get someone as left-wing as Andrew Neil is right-wing on a mainstream news channel. Absolutely no chance. but that's not extreme enough for him. So he's done his own version of Fox News, hasn't he? So again, you know, this is probably just to be able to say things that are worse than they think they are censoring themselves to say. Although someone was on it today, wasn't there? Chris Fletcher was on it today, apparently.
Chris Fletcher was on it, yeah. I felt like saying,
yeah.
you know who these people are. But she seemed to enjoy herself anyway. I hope they haven't murdered her in the edit. Oh, the press. The press are so fun to deal with, aren't they? I'm really glad to see Anne Willis say that the reason the press operate as they are is because it sells papers, which I am interpreting as Anne Willis accepting that capitalism is the problem. Sorry, Anne, I'm joking. I'm just playing. It's Facebook news, isn't it? You know, clickbait. Like you say, the feelings of fear and anger are the most easy to manipulate and to push those buttons. And especially on the internet now, you literally pay by how many seconds somebody looks at your advert. So they really are competing for attention, for eyeballs, and headlines that grab people's attention are often the most divisive ones. So it's one of these things where it is, whether it is by design or not, it's the way that the algorithm is manipulating our society almost. And do we need to think about how, should there be any limits put on that? Should there be controls on that? I think there probably should. But I also know that the people who are in control of manipulating people politically on Facebook are not inclined to put any control on themselves, and the statutory bodies which are supposed to regulate elections are about 10 years behind actual campaigning technology, so it's not looking great.
Look at Leveson. Leveson 2 never happened, but they said it was going to.
Don't have to do things anymore. You just say things during an election and then you just do them.
But it's even like the rehabilitation of people as well. It's like Piers Morgan, or like he was the editor of the Mirror when they hacked a dead girl's phone, and awful things happened. And there never really seems to be any consequence for people. They just like take a break and reinvent themselves and come back as the exact same thing, or a more powerful version.
No consequence for rich people. Poor Rasim Brown was going to be deported to Jamaica for being disabled. But Piers Morgan can hack a dead girl's phone and then go on to have a long and profitable career after it.
Did anybody mention Prince Andrew at the G7?
There was. Yeah.
Well, where's your Andrew at?
There was a thing, didn't Biden say that he's going to look at how we might bring Ansakoulis, is it Ansakoulis, to justice? But I'm not sure how that's possible. Free kebab. I want a free kebab. Anne is playing with my feelings now. Yeah, but where is he? And also, the other one came on. Is it Prince? Is it no? The other one.
No.
You said
Not
that.
Charles.
Is it Deck? Sorry, no, I'm being silly.
The other Prince came on the TV, not Charlie. And
Charlie.
I almost went, you. Oh, it's not you. You're his brother. So yeah, they're just keeping him somewhere while things blow over, I guess.
He's got a Facebook request, hasn't he? Prince Andrew. And it's like the FBI. And he just sits there and he's like, I'm not going to decline it, but I'm also not going to accept it.
Yeah. Wow. Right. I'm going to sleep. I'm falling asleep. I'm very tired. It's time to wind up the show. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to all of the people who commented. We had a great, very lively comment section today. Extra points for anyone who can manage to find swear words that the restream stars out in words that you didn't expect there to be a swear word in. Remember that we are on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and podcasts, and you can subscribe to all of those platforms. Please do. And also you can become a member of Socialist Think Tank. We are migrating our member discussions over to Discord, which is very exciting, but we will give you lots of help to move. It's actually very easy to use. I can use it. It's purple. There are lots of good reasons to use Discord. So we will see you next week. We are here every Tuesday at 9 o'clock. Bye.
See you later, everyone.
See you later.
Keep the red flag flying here.